Dear reader, I'm Tony and this is Book Text. It's time for another Friday read. I hope you're doing well, that you are healthy and safe as you're watching this video. First, our word of the day is another Victorian slang term, is the delightful term parish pickaxe. A parish pickaxe is shown on my face right now. It is a slang term for a prominent nose. So if you have a parish pickaxe like I do, you have the Victorian equivalent of a prominent schnoz. I thought that was kind of fun. So parish pickaxe. So I finished reading 2 books this week. I put a lot of books on hold so that I can finish my Victorian books, so I can prioritize those for Victober. And I am going to pick up one more book this next week. So I finished reading, finally, The Warden by Anthony Trollope. This is the first of his Barchester series. And this is the story of an older man who has been the warden of this hospital for, kind of a hospital. It seems like it's a nursing home for retired men. And he's been working there for a long time, but he finds out that he might not have been handling the funding appropriately. So he kind of comes under legal fire for this, and the story unfolds from there. There's some entanglement with his daughter, and the man that she wants to marry is involved in kind of the legal runnings of this. It was super interesting. It started off pretty slowly for me. I was trying to figure out Trollope's style, his kind of plots, what he focuses on in his writing. And by the end, I really enjoyed it. The ending itself was not what I was expecting, and I found it kind of refreshing, delightful. Not a good ending necessarily, but not a bad ending either. And so I'm definitely going to pick up the rest of Trollope's Barchester series and then some. He was quite prolific of a Victorian writer, and so I'm going to continue reading more from Trollope. I was pleasantly surprised with The Warden. Then I also finished my audiobook of Queen Victoria by Lucy Worsley. This nonfiction, follows Queen Victoria through several important days in her life, including things like the day she was born, the day that she found out she was going to be queen, the day she became queen, the day she met her future husband, Prince Albert, and so on. It was kind of fun to see these little snippets of the life of a famous historical figure. And I thought that Lucy Worsley had a really easy to read writing style. The way that she kind of portrayed these events was very much a narrative. So she's a good storyteller, and we need that in nonfiction. To help us kind of put things into context and remember them better. Our brains are wired to remember stories better than just facts. So narratives are important. I also thought that she did a good job of presenting Queen Victoria in a fair light, where she was looking at both her strengths and her weaknesses. It wasn't kind of like a hero worship kind of book, but it also wasn't tearing her down. So it was just kind of a fair look at snippets, right? Just pieces of Victoria's life. There's too much to consider in kind of one volume if we were to look at everything she ever did or said or was reported to have done. But I did enjoy learning about Victoria and kind of the influences that she had on literature at the time. She was influenced by literature herself. According to Worsley, she was very fond of Sir Walter Scott. And so both she and Prince Albert read a lot of kind of those Scottish romances from the 18th century. And that influenced some of their courtship, but also some of the things that they enjoyed. They loved Scotland for that reason. And so there was kind of some interesting points about Victoria's life regarding the literature that she read. I enjoyed that. So I have continued to read 3 Victorian novels. I put everything else I'm reading on hold so that I can finish Victober and meet my goals. And I realized that I had to put myself on a stricter schedule, a reading schedule. So I actually went through these books and kind of marked off how much I had to read each day in order to finish on time. So I'm about halfway through 2 of these books, and I'm mostly done with one of them, which is Charlotte Bronte's Shirley. I am so in love with this book. It's totally, like, definitely the biggest surprise of Victober this year for me. I was not expecting a lot from it. I came in with really low expectations. I've had some friends attempt to read it and not be able to finish it. I've had other friends say that they loved this more than Jane Eyre, that it was their favorite Victorian novel ever. And so I just kind of came into this thing like with an open mind, right? This could go in many different directions. This is the story of 2 women living in the early 19th century. I'm not sure that this one clarifies a time period per se. During the Napoleonic Wars, okay? And so early 19th century. And they are friends. And that is one of the things that I love about this book, is that these 2 characters, Shirley and Caroline, they are very different women, but they have this friendship. And we don't see a lot of good friendships in kind of romantic literature between women. It's always focusing on the relationship, maybe between family members, but also between, the man and the woman involved, or maybe a love triangle, right? And there are hints of love triangles in here, but they are not emphasized. And I am just, like I said, this is so cool. I love this book. There is this historical element of kind of the Industrial Revolution and the mills that are kind of taking over some of the agricultural work in the economy, and the retaliation that some of the agricultural workers are, or kind of itinerant workers are trying to, they're trying to bring revenge down upon these mills and the mill owners. And that is so cool. It's one of the coolest parts of this book involves a siege on a mill. And interestingly enough, there's a similar kind of angry mob scene in one of the other books that I read. So I'll share that in just a moment. But I finished my reading for today. I'm reading about 20 pages a day to finish on time. And I just barely finished reading for today. And the craziest thing happened in the last sentence of the chapter that I read. I don't think I can stop there. I think I'll have to keep going today because, like, seriously, something insane just happened and I need to keep reading. So I'm going to kind of quickly go through the rest of my video to get back to that. So the other 2 books that I've been reading, I'm about halfway through Elizabeth Gaskell's Sylvia's Lovers. This is also not what I was expecting. It's kind of fun to go into these books not knowing very much about them. But this is the story of a seaside town and the people that live there, and characters like Sylvia, who is loved by one man and she loves another man. There's a really interesting element of, and I haven't looked this up to see if this actually happened in history, but because of the wars in the seas that are going on during this time, they're called press gangs. They are kind of swarming into these seaside towns to capture men who, usually sailors, fishermen, that kind of whalers, that kind of thing. And they are kidnapping them in order to put them into the Queen's, or in this case, I think it's the King's service as soldiers, as the Navy, which is crazy to think that it's kind of their form of the draft that we had in America in the 20th century. But that is a major kind of plot device in this story, are these press gangs. This is the book that has another scene of an angry mob. And what's interesting is that there's a lot of consequences that come out of these mob scenes, both in Shirley and in Sylvia's Lovers. So you're dealing with kind of like the fallout of what happens after a riot, or what happens after an attack, a mob attack. So that is a really interesting element that I was not expecting. I was expecting kind of just like the romance, but I forget that these writers were good researchers, and they looked into kind of the history and the landscape, the political landscape of the times they were writing in. So that is a really cool element of Sylvia's Lovers. I'm also about halfway through Thomas Hardy's The Woodlanders. This is so poetic. I had to put the book down one day to kind of read more about Thomas Hardy himself, because I was like, where did this man come from? Like, what was kind of the maybe impetus for him writing some of these such beautiful passages? The book is about a group of people living in woodlands, and the kind of class issues that they're dealing with. There's a lot of description of how they are kind of taking care of the woods, how they live off of the trees that are around them. There was a fascinating character who was afraid of a tree that was outside of his window, and the tree had been planted kind of the year that he was born, so it represented him in a way. And so when the tree was felled, in order to prevent him from being afraid of it falling on him, they cut it down to be safer, and he went crazy and died because of it. So there's kind of some fun metaphors, some fun analogies. The main story is about different characters and their, I would say it's a love triangle, but it's kind of more like a love scatter plot. There's so many connections that you could draw between these different characters, and I haven't quite sorted it out, but I think Thomas Hardy has things well in hand. So I'm kind of looking forward to finishing that book. So that's what I have been reading. I'm also still reading The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. This is an audiobook that I'm listening to while I do my walks. And so far, it is actually quite similar to the, I think it was a movie adaptation from the 50s or 60s. Actually, I think I have a VHS tape of it. I'll go find that real fast. I found it. This is my VHS tape. Do you guys remember VHS tapes? Blast from the Past. This was the movie from 1960, and I always thought it was a little bit more boring than other adaptations because it deals a lot with the characters talking about their philosophies of time and time travel and kind of the fourth dimension of time, and that is exactly what happened in the first few chapters of the book. So I'm thinking that this movie is a lot closer to the book than I thought it was. I will have to rewatch the movie because I don't remember a lot of the rest of the plot, but as I'm listening to the book, maybe it will remind me of things that I've seen. So it's kind of fun just to compare things to adaptations or other literature. So I'm still listening to The Time Machine on audiobook. Now, this next week, I'm going to finish everything that I've been reading and start reading George Eliot's Scenes of Clerical Life. I am actually participating in a small buddy read or group read with Kate Howe and Kate from the novel Nomad, and we will be discussing these 3 kind of novellas, long short stories from George Eliot. This was actually her fictional debut. This was the first thing that she published that was fiction, and it was praised by Charles Dickens, among others. But it explores the lives of several clergymen and their communities. And I think that's interesting because I recently read My Life in Middlemarch by Rebecca Mead, which is kind of a bit of a biography of George Eliot. And faith was a very present, it was a present question in her life, whether she had it or didn't have it at different points of her life. She was raised in a very faithful household and a faithful community. She went to kind of church-run schools. And so she was around clergy a lot. But she did abandon her faith in a way, and in later life. Anyway, you just have to read a little bit more about her yourself. But I'm looking forward to reading this and discussing this with Kate and Kate. So what are you reading right now? How is your Victober going if you're participating? I'd love to hear, especially if you've read any of the books that I am reading, or if you are reading Shirley and you got to the point that I'm talking about in volume 3, where the chapter ended and I can't stop there. It's a cliffhanger. Did you read that? Have you gotten to that point? Please share without spoilers, just share your reaction in the comments. And remember, there's always another book.